Everyone says keep family drama private. I say expose it when it's felony-sized. The gentle clinking of silverware against porcelain should have been a comforting melody that Thanksgiving evening. The golden brown turkey gleamed under the soft dining room light, its buttery aroma filling the air. Ruby-hued cranberry sauce shimmered in crystal bowls, and my cornbread stuffing carried the scent of home. Every detail had been prepared with love. Since my husband's passing, traditions like these were the threads that kept me stitched together. But peace is a delicate thing. One cruel word can rip it apart in an instant. "You're not even half the woman my mother is," my daughter-in-law Quinn declared, her tone sharp enough to cut through the laughter that had filled the room only seconds before. The table fell silent. Forks froze midway to lips. My brother-in-law gave an awkward cough, and the television in the living room, blaring the football game, suddenly felt too loud, too alive against the stillness that had settled. I stood there at the head of my own table, the sweet potato pie still baking in the oven, and felt a tremor in my chest. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd misheard her. But then I saw it, that little smirk playing on Quinn's lips, and I knew she'd meant every word. Slowly, I pushed my chair back. The scrape of its wooden legs across the floor sounded like a drum roll, one that warned the storm had just begun. My voice came calm, even steady, though my heart was thundering inside me. "Then she can start paying your rent." Gasps. My cousin dropped her fork. One of the kids whispered, "What rent?" But it was my son Morgan's reaction that made the air thick as molasses. His face went pale, almost ghost white, his jaw slackened. "Rent," he stammered. "What rent?" And in that single moment, the carefully woven fabric of our family gathering unraveled. I didn't answer right away. Sometimes silence is its own weapon. I let the weight of my words sink into the walls of the dining room, into the crystal glasses filled with sweet tea and wine, into the very bones of the house I had built with my late husband. Morgan's eyes darted around the table, searching for rescue. None came. Bobbed like he was choking on more than just turkey. "What do you mean?" he whispered. I could feel everyone watching, waiting, the tension hanging like the smell of overcooked collard greens. And deep inside, I knew the night had reached a point of no return. This wasn't going to be another family squabble that would disappear with dessert. No, this was the night secrets would start tumbling out, the kind of secrets that alter the course of lives. I leaned back in my chair and let my words fall into the room like stones into still water. "Morgan," I said quietly, "it's time you asked your wife what exactly she's been doing with my signature, my accounts, and my good name." A fork clattered to the table. My niece gasped. Quinn's smirk faltered for the first time, replaced by a flicker of something else. Fear. Or maybe calculation. She recovered quickly, tilting her chin in that way she always did when she wanted to look superior. "Don't be dramatic, Nain," she said, rolling her eyes. "This isn't the place for your accusations. But the thing about truth is, it doesn't wait for a convenient time. It erupts, uninvited, right in the middle of your Thanksgiving dinner if it must." I folded my arms. Maybe it isn't the place, but it is the time. Morgan finally slammed his palm on the table, his voice shaking. "Will somebody please tell me what's going on, Mom? What rent? What accounts? What are you talking about?" The room had gone so silent, I could hear the football announcer in the background yelling about a touchdown. It felt surreal, two worlds colliding, one on the screen, one at my table. I wanted to tell him everything right then and there. No, but no. Timing was power, and I had learned over the years of working in finance and dealing with men who thought a black woman couldn't possibly know her numbers, that sometimes the best strategy was to hold the cards close until the table was ready to flip. So I simply looked at my son with the steady gaze of a mother who has carried too much, given too much, and seen too much. "All I'll say tonight," I whispered, is that what you don't know, Morgan, can hurt you. And what you think is secured, well, it might just be standing on my shoulders more than you realize." His face crumpled with confusion. Together, widowed for 5 years. I had built a life of quiet strength in the suburbs of Atlanta, in a brick house with shutters the color of sweet tea. The HOA rules were strict grass cut to exactly 3 ins. No holiday lights past January, but I took comfort in the order. It mirrored the way I had always run my life. Steady, responsible, never missing a payment, never leaving a bill unanswered. I wasn't rich, but I had stability, something my late husband Charles and I had worked our entire lives for. Charles had been a city bus driver, the kind of man who brought home callous hands and a tired smile. And I was an accountant turned finance officer for a local charter school. We raised our only child, Morgan, with the hope that he would never have to count pennies the way we once did. Morgan had always been my pride and joy. Bright-eyed, sensitive, a little too trusting at times. He'd studied logistics at Georgia State and now worked night shifts at a distribution center. Not glamorous, but steady work still, even as a man. He often looked at me with the same expression he'd had as a boy, expecting me to fix the mess, to make everything right. And then there was Quinn Parker, my daughter-in-law. She came into Morgan's life like a whirlwind, bold, camera-ready, every moment curated for Instagram. She worked in PR for a luxury skincare brand, the kind of job that demanded appearances at rooftop mixers and charity galas. Quinn was beautiful, no denying that. Tall, perfectly coiffed, always in designer shoes that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. But what unsettled me wasn't her glamour. It was her constant comparisons. "My mother would never live in a place like this," she'd say, wrinkling her nose at my floral curtains. Or any. "My mother has people who handle her taxes. She doesn't spend hours with receipts at the kitchen table." Her mother, Gloria Parker, was a self-styled motivational speaker who hosted live stream seminars on manifesting abundance and living your best life. Photos of her sipping wine on a balcony in Destin, Florida, or posing with clients at luxury resorts filled Quinn's social media feeds. I'd done my own quiet research, though. Gloria's nonprofit foundation seemed to exist mostly on paper, its tax-exempt status still pending, according to the IRS database. But I kept those doubts to myself. Quinn adored her mother and measured the rest of us against. Keep the peace. My own mama taught me that dignity sometimes meant swallowing your pride. But Thanksgiving night, when Quinn spat out that I wasn't half the woman her mother was, I realized there was a limit even to Southern patience. Looking back, the warning signs had been there for months. The sleek car payments Morgan couldn't fully explain. The shopping bags Quinn carried into their apartment when I knew his job barely covered rent. The way she flinched every time money came up, redirecting the conversation to how Mom knows how to invest, or Mom has a way of making opportunities appear. Morgan had once come to me in tears, confessing that bills were piling up. "Just for a few months, Mom," he'd begged, "until we get back on our feet." My heart, soft as cornbread, had melted. I dipped into savings, covered gaps quietly, convinced myself it was temporary. I even added him once, years back, to a secondary debit card in case of emergencies. I thought I was protecting him the way mothers do. But mothers can love so deeply they blind themselves. Atlanta had its rhythms. Traffic jams on I-285, Braves games in the summer, church bells on Sunday mornings. I found joy in small routines, singing alto in the church choir, baking peach cobbler for the neighbors, walking the path lined with dogwoods near my house. I believed life was predictable, that I could manage its numbers like I balanced spreadsheets, until little cracks began to show. An envelope misdelivered to my address, stamped with Magnolia Lofts, a building in Midtown known more for co-working studios than family apartments. A Venmo notification on Morgan's phone with the memo, "Magnolia Office Refresh." The scent of a perfume, Labo's Centel 33, clinging to his jacket, when I knew it wasn't Quinn's. I told myself I was imagining things. Mothers worry too much, don't they? But that Thanksgiving table told me the truth would no longer stay buried. I sipped water to steady my breathing as whispers filled my dining room behind me. Morgan's words, "Rent? What rent?" still rang in my ears. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just about rent. It was about trust, about signatures and accounts, and names used without permission. About a mother-in-law painted as less than, when in reality she was the foundation holding ever. Turned, there were signs. Small, almost invisible threads that tugged at me, whispering that something deeper was unraveling. The first clue arrived in the most ordinary way, a misdelivered envelope. It had my name printed neatly on the front end, Ellison, but the return address made my stomach tighten. Piedmont Property Management. Magnolia Lofts, Suite, 2 walls. Magnolia Lofts wasn't some family-friendly apartment complex. Everyone in Atlanta knew it was a midtown development full of glass-walled co-working spaces, yoga studios, and trendy lofts for young professionals. Why would I, a 52-year-old widow living comfortably in my suburban brick home, be receiving mail from there? I set the envelope aside at first, convincing myself it was junk mail. But later that evening, curiosity got the better of me. I sliced it open with my kitchen shears. Inside was a glossy flyer reminding tenants about holiday lobby decor guidelines and an upcoming rent deadline. At the bottom, in bold print, was a bill to name N. Ellison. I sat back in my chair, flyer trembling in my hand. 2 nights later, another hint appeared. Morgan had stopped by to pick up leftovers, his face tired, his shirt smelling faintly of cologne that was not his usual. When he reached into his glove compartment to grab a charger, a small laminated card slipped out. Magnolia Lofts, parking permit 204. I froze. "What's that?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He glanced down, scooped it up quickly, and shoved it back inside. "Oh, just a work thing, deliveries. They assigned parking spots sometimes." He didn't meet my eyes. He never was good at lying, not even as a boy sneaking cookies before dinner. Still, I let it go, at least out loud. Inside, my mind was racing. The third sign came in digital form. I was updating my online banking when I noticed a small, recurring debit every 5th of the month, Award 900, labeled simply Piedmont Property, MCI. My heart dropped. $1,900 wasn't groceries. It wasn't utilities. That was rent money. I stared at the screen, scrolling through past statements, and saw it, clear as daylight. The withdrawals had been happening for nearly a year, every month like clockwork, and every month I hadn't questioned it. I had assumed it was Morgan covering some expense, saying, "Great is thy faithfulness." My eyes drifted to the congregation where Morgan and Quinn sat. She was scrolling on her phone during the sermon, perfectly polished in a cream sweater dress, while Morgan shifted uncomfortably, his gaze fixed on the floor. After the service, I overheard her bragging to another young wife. "Mom's got this new office space in Midtown, Magnolia Lofts. She's hosting donor brunches there. It's going to elevate everything. Real investors this time. Office space, donor brunches, Midtown." The word struck me like a hammer. Later that afternoon, when I went to drop off cookies for a neighbor, I saw another envelope in my mailbox. This one stamped Gloria Parker Foundation. Inside was an invitation printed on gold-foiled cardstock. Annual Donor Appreciation Brunch, Magnolia Loft, number 204. The brunch was next weekend. My name was on the guest list. I pressed the card to my chest and laughed bitterly. How thoughtful of Gloria to invite me to an event hosted in a loft I apparently helped pay for. The more I thought about it, the more the puzzle pieces sharpened. Morgan's unexplained deliveries, Quinn's obsession with her mother's success, my recurring payments to Piedmont Property Management, and now an official event at Magnolia Lofts with Gloria's name plastered all over it. But there was one more sign, subtle but telling. When I hugged Morgan goodbye later that week, a faint scent clung to his jacket. It wasn't his usual deodorant or Quinn's floral perfume. No, this was expensive. Niche Santal 33 by Lille Labo, a scent popular in Midtown circles, worn by people who wanted to be noticed without saying a word. I pulled back, looking at him carefully. He smiled nervously, kissed my cheek, and muttered something about working late as his car pulled away. I stood in my driveway under the glow of the street lamp, clutching my cardigan against the chill. Everything about this picture felt wrong. I was raised to trust to help my family when they fell, to believe that if I kept accounts straight and bills paid, life would remain in order. But here I was, surrounded by small cracks in a facade I thought was solid. And with every new clue, the envelope, the parking permit, the recurring debit, the golden invitation, I realized those cracks weren't small at all. They were fault lines. Same number on Morgan's parking pass. The same number on Gloria's brunch invitation. My heart thudded. I'd spent my career managing accounts, catching tiny discrepancies others overlooked. And yet here I was, overlooking thousands of dollars vanishing month after month under my own name. But the detail that chilled me most wasn't the money. It was the billing profile. Next to authorized payer, it listed N. Ellison, me. And attached to that file was a copy of a digital lease signed electronically. I downloaded the PDF, hands trembling as it loaded on my screen. The tenant listed Gloria Parker Foundation. The guarantor, Nayan Ellison. The signature, my name. But I had never signed it. I scrolled through the fine print, my breath shallow. The lease had been executed almost a year ago on a date I remembered well. That was the week Morgan had been in the hospital for a minor surgery. I'd been at the hospital with him the whole time. There was no way I had been signing leases in Midtown. I checked the signature stamp again. It matched my name perfectly, down to the way I always loop the E in Ellison. But something about the slant felt off, as though someone had copied it from a scanned document. I whispered to myself, "This isn't my hand. This is fraud." My stomach twisted. Fraud against me. By whom? I closed the document quickly, afraid the weight of what I had seen would crush me if I stared too long. Instead, I opened my email. I typed Piedmont Property Management into the search bar, and there it was, an unread message from 2 weeks earlier. Subject, past due notice. Body, Dear Miss Ellison, this is a reminder that the account for Unit 204 Magnolia Lofts has a balance pending. Please ensure autopay remains active to avoid penalties. I clutched the edge of the table. Unit 204 wasn't just quietly being paid, it was slipping, and now the company was coming to me to fix it. I printed the email and the lease, tucking them into a folder labeled simply Magnolia. Years in finance had taught me one rule above all: always keep the paper trail. But I couldn't stop there. I needed to know how my name had been used. I checked my files, flipping through the manila folders where I kept copies of old documents, my will, Charles's death certificate, Morgan's college financial aid. Cold. I set the folder down and stared at the photo of Charles on the mantel. His smile looked steady, reassuring, the way it always had when I panicked over bills in our younger years. "Charles," I whispered, "they've been using me, our name, our work." That night, I forced myself to attend the donor brunch at Magnolia Lofts. I wore my best plum-colored dress, the one that always made me feel composed. My heels clicked against the polished floors. As I entered the lobby, the space was sleek, all glass and chrome, decorated with gold balloons and a banner that read, Gloria Parker Foundation Annual Brunch. Inside, women in tailored suits and men in fitted blazers sipped mimosas and exchanged business cards. A jazz trio played softly in the corner. Gloria Parker stood at the center like a queen, dressed in emerald silk, her voice ringing out as she laughed with donors. "Ah, Nain," she exclaimed when she spotted me. "So glad you could join us. Isn't this space divine? We just love Magnolia, don't we?" She spread her arms as if to show off the loft like it was her personal empire. I smiled politely, though bile rose in my throat. Yes, it's very polished. As the event went on, I listened closely. Gloria boasted about expanding operations and new investors. She spoke of programs empowering women, but never gave specifics. When one man asked about the foundation's IRS status, she waved it off. "Just a formality. Paperwork is so tedious, isn't it?" My fingers itched for the folder back home, the one that held her lease signed with my name. I scanned the room, and there was Morgan, fidgeting by the refreshment table, his eyes darting between his wife and his mother-in-law. He looked nervous, cornered, like a man who knew the house of cards might collapse at any moment. And as I watched, I felt the pieces click together. The lease, the payments, the POA, the event hosted in my name. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was evidence, and it was only the beginning. After the brunch at Magnolia Lofts, I couldn't look at Gloria the same way. Every word she spoke sounded rehearsed, every smile like a mask painted too bright. But what unsettled me most wasn't Gloria. It was the way Morgan hovered in the background, avoiding my eyes, letting the charade play out. I went and thought the line had gone dead. "Finally," Morgan whispered. "Mom, please." Not over the phone. That night, he showed up at my house. He looked exhausted, his shirt untucked, dark circles under his eyes. He sat at my kitchen table, staring at the folder spread before him. "I didn't know it was still coming out of your account," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "Quinn said it was handled. She said it was temporary." I leaned forward. "Handled how? With my name, with my savings." He winced. "She said the foundation just needed a guarantor until investors came through. She said you'd understand." I nearly laughed. "Understand, Morgan? Do you realize what you've done? This isn't some favor. This is fraud. If they default, my credit, my house, everything I've built could be on the line." He dropped his head into his hands. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I thought it was just a signature, just a formality. Quinn said I cut him off." "Quinn says a lot of things." He looked up at me then, eyes pleading. "Mom, don't make this bigger than it is." "Bigger?" I snapped. "Morgan, this is already bigger than you realize." For the first time, I saw fear flicker across his face. He wasn't just worried about me. He was worried about what Quinn would say, what Gloria might do if their carefully crafted image cracked. That fear told me everything. Over the next week, I started digging deeper. I pulled credit reports, scanned county property records, and searched the Georgia Secretary of State's database for the Gloria Parker Foundation. Sure enough, the nonprofit application had been rejected twice for incomplete filings. The foundation wasn't a charity. It was a brand in disguise. I also checked real estate records for that beach house in Destin Quinn always bragged about. It wasn't owned by Gloria. It was a revolving Airbnb rental booked under different names every few months. And then came the biggest find, an old power of attorney document buried in my files, the one Morgan had signed before his surgery, granting Quinn temporary authority. I had signed too back then, thinking it was harmless. But tucked in the fine print was a clause. The POA could be used to update billing information on behalf of the account holder. That was how they'd done it. Quinn had used that temporary authority to tie my bank account to their lease. The next family dinner, Quinn made another one of her digs about my house being stuck in the 90s. I smiled sweetly, biting my tongue, but I noticed how her eyes flickered when Morgan mentioned the rent coming due. She tightened her grip on her wine glass, her manicured nails digging into the stem. The cracks were showing. 2 nights later at choir practice, I sat beside Deacon Harris, who also happened to be a lawyer. I asked him hypothetically about guarantor fraud. His eyes widened when I explained. "Nain," he said quietly, "that's not hypothetical. You need to protect yourself immediately." He gave me a list of steps. Freeze the secondary card. Place fraud alerts with the credit bureaus. Revoke any lingering POA authority. His words were steady, but the gravity was clear. As I drove home that night, the city lights blurred through my windshield. My stomach churned, but not from fear anymore, from resolve. I had spent my whole life keeping peace, smoothing over conflicts, sacrificing for family. But now they had used my name, my credit, my savings, all while belittling me at my own table. The old Nain might have let it slide, but the woman staring back at me in the rearview mirror was finished being quiet. The storm was gathering, and this time I would be the one steering it. The Sunday of Gloria's next live stream. I sat in my living room with a notebook open and my laptop balanced on the coffee table. Gloria had been promoting this event all week. Donor brunch, transparency, and growth. But transparency was the last thing on her agenda. She appeared on screen in a white blazer, pearls gleaming at her neck, ope behind her. I recognized the polished windows of Magnolia Loft 204, the same space my bank account had been bleeding for month after month. "Friends," she said, her voice honeyed, "the Gloria Parker Foundation is entering its most powerful year yet. Thanks to our Midtown headquarters, we are expanding programs, empowering women, and changing lives. I scribbled the words down. Midtown headquarters, programs expanding. All vague, all hollow. But then she held up a stack of glossy pamphlets. We're preparing our official nonprofit certification. Just a matter of time before the IRS finalizes. And to those who have already pledged, thank you. Your I folded my arms. Then explain. He leaned against the counter, avoiding my eyes. When I signed that surgery paperwork last year, I gave Quinn temporary POA. She said she'd only use it for small things. I didn't know she tied it to the lease. I didn't even know about the lease until months later. She said it was Mom's project, not mine. I let his words hang in the air. So, you're telling me you didn't know your wife was using my name to guarantee her mother's foundation? Loft? I swear, he said, eyes glassy. I didn't know it was under your account. She told me Gloria had investors covering everything. She said you wouldn't be bothered. I stared at him, my heart heavy. Morgan, do you realize what this means? She forged my name. She misused legal authority. She's committing fraud, and you're standing by watching. He swallowed hard. I thought she was protecting her mom's pride. I thought if it all worked out, you'd never even notice. That was when the first revelation hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just Gloria. It wasn't just Quinn. It was Morgan, too. Through his silence, through his blind loyalty, through his willingness to let me carry the weight. I turned away, staring at the framed family photos on the wall. Morgan at his high school graduation. Morgan holding his first baseball glove. Morgan and Quinn on their wedding day, beaming like the future belonged to them. Do you know what hurts most? I said quietly. Not the money, not the fraud. It's that my own son thought it was easier to keep me in the dark than to tell me the truth. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The next day, I dug deeper into Gloria's so-called foundation. I visited the Georgia Secretary of State's office online again, cross-referencing filings. Sure enough, there was no 501c3 status, no board of directors, no Form 9990s, nothing but a name and a PO1 box listed under Gloria's name. I printed it all, adding to my folder, and then I called the IRS helpline. The agent on the other end confirmed what I already suspected. Ma'am, there was no recognized nonprofit under that name. If they're soliciting donations, they're operating illegally. My hands shook as I hung up the phone. That evening, I attended Bible study at church. I listened quietly. Changes everything. As I pulled into my driveway that night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop asking questions. You don't know who you're dealing with. I froze, the glow of the screen burning into my palm. My heart hammered, but then a strange calm washed over me. They wanted me to be afraid, but fear was fuel. If Gloria thought a warning text would silence me, she didn't know me at all, because this was only the first reveal. The deeper truth was still waiting to be uncovered. The anonymous text lingered in my mind all week. Stop asking questions. You don't know who you're dealing with. But instead of stopping me, it pushed me forward. I started connecting dots faster than ever between my folder of documents, late-night online searches, and quiet conversations with people who knew Gloria. A much darker picture began to emerge. The real twist came when I visited the county clerk's office downtown. I'd requested access to public trust filings under the Parker name. It was routine paperwork, but what I found stopped me cold. There it was, a draft document titled Ellison Family Living Trust. My name sat neatly at the top with a line underneath that read, Successor Trustee Gloria Parker. My chest tightened. A living trust. With Gloria in control, I scanned the fine print. It wasn't finalized, just a draft, but the intent was clear. They had been preparing paperwork to transfer my house, my savings, my everything into a trust managed by Gloria. It wasn't just about the loft rent. It wasn't just about forged signatures. They had planned to move my entire estate under her name. I pressed a hand to my chest, steadying myself. The thought of my late husband's house, our house, slipping into Gloria's hands made my stomach turn. I copied the draft and added it to my growing folder. Then I called Morgan. Meet me at the house tonight. No, I told him, and bring your wife. When they arrived, Quinn walked in first, her heels clicking like a gavel. She looked around my dining room as though she owned it, her designer coat sliding off her shoulders. Morgan trailed behind, nervous and sweating. I didn't bother with pleasantries. I spread the documents across the table, the lease, the bank statements, the IRS denial, and finally the draft trust. Quinn's eyes flicked over the pages. Her face remained perfectly composed, but her fingers all the time. "Families don't lie," I said sharply. "Families don't steal." Morgan rubbed his forehead. "Quinn, maybe we should tell her." "Tell me what I demanded." The room fell silent. Finally, Morgan blurted out the truth. "Mom, Gloria needed collateral. Investors wouldn't take her seriously without proof of assets. She said if your name backed the lease, if she had documents showing she was trustee, then big money would follow. She promised it was just paperwork, nothing binding, nothing real, just to show she had connections." I stared at him in disbelief. "So you put my name, my house, my life's work on the line for her lies?" He looked down, ashamed. Quinn straightened her shoulders, her eyes blazing. "It's not lies, it's branding. Image is everything. Investors don't care about the details. They care about perception. And my mother knows how to create perception better than anyone." I slammed my palm on the table. "Perception built on my blood and sweat, on Charles's memory on the roof I sacrificed to keep over our heads. Not anymore." For the first time, Quinn's composure cracked. "You think you can just pull out now? Do you realize how many people have already pledged money? Do you realize what happens if the foundation collapses? My mother's reputation." I cut her off with a bitter laugh. "Reputation built on fraud deserves to collapse." Morgan reached for my hand, his voice trembling. "Mom, please. If you go public with this, it'll ruin everything. People will think I was part of it." I pulled my hand away. "Morgan, you were part of it. Maybe not with your pen, but with your silence." He flinched, tears welling in his eyes. The weight of the room pressed down on us all. For months they had plotted in whispers, assuming I would never notice. But now every hidden scheme sat exposed on my dining room table. And as I looked from my son to his wife, I realized the full scale of the betrayal. It wasn't just about money. It was about control, about erasing me, rewriting my story so that Gloria could hold the pen. But here's the thing about women like me. We may bend, we may sacrifice, but we don't break. I gathered the papers into my folder, stood tall, and looked Quinn in the eye. "You and your mother have underestimated betrayal." Something new stirred in me. Resolve. I'd spent years balancing accounts, teaching financial literacy workshops, and catching small mistakes in ledgers before they became disasters. I knew how to follow the trail of money. And this time, the ledger I was balancing wasn't just financial. It was moral. If Gloria wanted to play with paperwork and perception, I would fight her with the same weapons, only sharper. The first step was cutting off access. The next morning, I called my bank. "Freeze the secondary card ending in 40,027, I instructed, and place a fraud alert on all accounts tied to Nain Ellison. The representative's tone was sympathetic, of course. "Ma'am, we'll also notify credit bureaus to flag any new attempts." With that, the pipeline Gloria had been using to siphon my money dried up. Next, I met quietly with Deacon Harris, the lawyer from my church. We sat in his office, shelves lined with dusty law books and framed certificates. I slid the folder across his desk. He adjusted his glasses as he flipped through the pages, the lease, the bank statements, the IRS denial, and finally, the draft trust. His brows furrowed deeper with each sheet. "This isn't just unethical," he said slowly. "This is criminal forgery, fraud, misuse of power of attorney, and solicitation under false nonprofit pretenses. If you wanted, you could press charges tomorrow." I nodded, my jaw tight. "But if I go straight to court, Gloria will spin it as family drama. She'll cry about a misunderstanding, blame me for being vindictive. I need to show her for what she is, not just to the law, but to the people she's deceived." He leaned back, studying me. "You want a strategy?" I smiled grimly. I've been an accountant for 25 years. I know how to build a case that speaks louder than excuses. And so the plan began. Step 1, evidence. I made copies of everything, digital and physical. I organized them into labeled binders: lease fraud, financial records, IRS filings, trust draft. I kept the originals locked in a safe deposit box at the bank where not even Morgan could touch them. Step 2, witnesses. I reached out quietly to a few women I knew who had attended Gloria's seminars. One, a retired teacher named Marlene, confessed she had donated $5,000 after Ballroom. Tickets sold at $150 a head with special recognition for top donors. Perfect. That night, I sat at my desk, typing steadily. I drafted an anonymous tip to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's business desk, attaching redacted versions of Gloria's filings. I also emailed the Better Business Bureau and the state attorney's office, marking each message urgent, fraudulent, nonprofit activity. I didn't expect immediate action. Bureaucracy moved slowly. But when the pieces aligned with her gala, I wanted eyes already watching. Meanwhile, I rehearsed my own role. I would attend the gala, dressed not in the muted tone Quinn mocked, but in the deep emerald gown Charles had once called my queen's dress. I would sit quietly until Gloria began her speech, and then, at the right moment, the truth would surface not from anger, not from chaos, but from undeniable documentation. As I mapped it out, my chest filled with a fire I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. It was protection of my name, my legacy, my dignity. The following Sunday, Morgan showed up again, his shoulders slumped. "Mom, please," he whispered. "Don't do anything drastic." Quinn's scared. "Gloria's under pressure. If you expose this, it'll destroy us." I looked at him long and hard. "Morgan, I raised you to know the difference between right and wrong. Destroying lies isn't destruction, it's justice. And maybe justice is exactly what you need." His eyes filled with tears, but for once, he didn't argue. That night, I sat at my vanity, applying lipstick with a steady hand. In the mirror, I didn't see the worn widow who'd been mocked for her curtains and casseroles. I saw a woman preparing for battle. Gloria thought she could erase me with paperwork, but she had underestimated the one truth I'd carried all my life. When you know the numbers, you know the story. And I was ready to tell the story they had tried so hard to hide. The night of Gloria Parker's vision, gala shimmered with false grandeur. The Midtown Ballroom glittered with chandeliers. Waiters glided past with trays of champagne flutes, and the red carpet was lined with amateur photographers snapping pictures for social media. I arrived alone, wrapped in my emerald gown, the one Charles had once said made me look like royalty. My heels clicked against marble floor. We celebrate the generosity of those who believe in this mission. Applause thundered. She beamed, soaking it in. I sat quietly, my folder of documents resting in my purse, waiting. As Gloria began parading success stories across the stage, vague testimonials, each one lacking details, I noticed a man in a gray suit seated at the media table. He wasn't clapping. He was scribbling notes. I recognized his badge. Atlanta Journal-Constitution Investigative Desk. Good, my tip had landed. Then came the moment Gloria loved most, unveiling new pledges. A large projector screen lit up with slides showing donor commitments, $10,000 here, $25,000 there. She spoke of expanding programs to Savannah, Birmingham, even Charlotte. And then with a flourish, she announced, "And none of this would be possible without the generosity of our key supporter, the guarantor who made our Midtown headquarters possible, Ms. Nadine Ellison." The spotlight turned on me. My stomach clenched. But I stood slowly, the room erupting in applause. Gloria's smile stretched wide, certain she had cornered me. But she didn't know what was coming. I walked gracefully to the stage, every step deliberate. When I reached the lectern, I leaned toward the microphone, my folder in hand. "Thank you, Gloria, for the introduction," I began, my voice calm but resonant. "And thank you, everyone, for believing in the mission of empowerment." The crowd cheered politely. Gloria clapped, her eyes narrowing just slightly. I opened my folder, lifting out the first binder. But empowerment begins with truth, and truth requires transparency. I held up a copy of the lease. "This is the contract for Magnolia Loft 204, signed under my name without my consent." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Gloria's smile faltered. "This," I continued, raising another document, "is the IRS record showing that the Gloria Parker Foundation has been denied nonprofit status not once, but twice." Gasps filled the room. I could see the reporter in the gray suit scribbling faster. "And this," I said, lifting the trust draft, "is a legal document prepared to transfer my home and estate into a trust managed by Gloria Parker herself, a trust I never agreed to." The room erupted in shocked whispers. Donors exchanged horrified. "Promised scholarships for my daughter. Where is that money?" Another voice. "You said we were funding shelters. Where are the shelters?" Panic spread like wildfire. Gloria's polished facade cracked. She raised her hands, stammering excuses. It's all in progress. Paperwork delays." Quinn grabbed Morgan's arm, whispering urgently, but he pulled away for the first time all evening. My son looked directly at me, shame etched across his face. The reporter from the Journal rose from his chair. "Miss Parker, would you like to go on record about these accusations? Because I have copies of these documents now." He held up the handouts I had slipped to him earlier. Gloria's face drained of color. Security began whispering into radios. Donors filed out in angry clusters. The jazz band stopped playing mid-ong, instruments hanging in the air like unanswered questions. And me? I stood tall, the weight of years lifting off my shoulders. This was my sweet revenge. Not through shouting, not through violence, but through truth, delivered in the very room where Gloria thought she reigned supreme. By the time I left the ballroom, reporters were swarming, cameras flashing. Gloria was cornered, Quinn pale and trembling, Morgan frozen between them. The next morning, the headline blared across the local news. "Gloria Parker Foundation under fire, allegations of fraud, forgery, and false promises." The article cited financial documents, witness statements, and IRS confirmation, all tied neatly together. The public outrage was immediate. Social media buzzed with hashtags. Donors demanded refunds, and Gloria's empire crumbled in real time. For once, I didn't feel like the quiet widow mocked for her curtains and casseroless. I felt like a woman who had taken back her power, not with bitterness, but with strategy. And as the sun streamed through my window the next morning, I knew the consequences were only just beginning. The weeks after the gala unfolded like a storm. News crews camped outside Gloria's loft, her name plastered across headlines, former donors lined up to file complaints. State investigators announced an inquiry into fraudulent nonprofit activity. The woman who once draped herself in silk and sequins was now pictured in newspapers with sunglasses pulled low, her hair unkempt, rushing past cameras into closed-door meetings with building on. Lies collapse. Truth holds. He wept, and for the first time in years I heard my son, not Quinn's husband, not Gloria's pawn, but my son. In the meantime, I focused on myself. I enrolled in a writing workshop at the community center, finally chasing the dream I'd whispered to Charles years ago, to write a book about the stories behind the numbers, the lives I'd encountered as an accountant. I started going on morning walks, not to escape worry, but to enjoy the rustle of dogwoods and the chatter of neighbors. And I learned to say no to Morgan, to anyone who tried to make me feel less than. For 52 years, I'd put others first. Now it was my time. The church rallied around me. Women who'd once quietly nodded at Quinn's sharp comments now pulled me aside after service. "Nayan, you inspire us," they said, "the way you handled it with grace, but with steel. You showed us it's never too late to stand up for yourself." One Sunday after choir practice, Deacon Harris approached. "Nayan," he said with a knowing smile, "you ever thought about teaching a financial literacy class here? Lord knows half this congregation could use your wisdom." I laughed, surprised by the warmth bubbling inside me. "Maybe I will." And then came the phone call that turned everything on its head again. It was from a number I didn't recognize, a man's voice, deep and careful. Miss Ellison, my name is Richard Caldwell. I was one of Gloria Parker's investors. I braced myself, ready for anger, but his tone surprised me. I lost money to her scheme, he admitted, but before I pull my support completely, I want to say something. She wasn't always like this. Years ago, Gloria was sharp, hard-working. Somewhere along the way, she learned to fake success instead of building it. But I believe in redemption, and I think maybe she's hit rock bottom now. I sat in silence, the irony washing over me. Gloria Parker, the woman who had mocked me through her daughter, stolen my name, and nearly stolen my future, was now being spoken of with pity, he continued. Miss Ellison, if you ever want to launch your own foundation, something real, something honest, you'll have investors ready. People are hungry for leaders they can actually trust. Part of all this is, what's that son? He stared at the horizon, and that I let her convince me you weren't enough, when the truth is, you were the only one holding us together all along. I reached for his hand. We all fall for illusions, Morgan. The trick is learning when to open our eyes. He nodded, tears glistening in the fading light. Months later, on the day of Gloria's sentencing hearing, I received a message that gave me pause. It was an email from Quinn. Just one line. You may have won, but you'll never know the whole story. No attachments, no explanation. I sat back, staring at the screen. Was it bitterness? A warning? Or was there truly more hidden beneath Gloria's glittering facade? Other accounts, other victims, another layer still buried. I didn't know. But here's what I did know. I had reclaimed my name, my dignity, my life. And maybe the mystery of what Gloria had truly built would linger. Maybe there were still secrets out there, waiting. But I had no fear anymore, because I'd learned the most powerful truth of all. Even when lies tower like skyscrapers, a single steady truth can bring them down. And I was that truth. Your turn. If you were Nayan, would you have exposed everything at the gala, or handled it quietly behind closed doors? Tell me in the comments. Your insight may help another woman tonight who's carrying her own hidden battles. If this story touched you, hit like and share it with a friend who needs to hear she is not alone. For more cinematic dramas of family, betrayal, smart revenge, and healing, subscribe to Voice of Nava and ring the bell so you never miss a chapter. We bring new 60 to 75-minute stories every week. Thank you for watching, for feeling, for thinking out loud. See you in the next story.